between that guy. All right, well, we're continuing on with our look at the book of Genesis, so we're going to cover chapters 20 through 22 today. Again, trying to cover this in large sections, and there's a lot to see. And so there's probably some stuff that we may skip over, but we're trying to kind of stay with the big picture of the whole title of this is The End from the Beginning, where God's taking all of this. So you would make your way to chapter 20, and we'll get moving. Chapter 20, we get another round of what Abraham does in Egypt early on, of Sarah as his sister. Now we get a little more detail in chapter 20 on a couple of levels, but let's just go ahead and take a look at this. Just start in verse 1. From there, this is after Abraham spent the time around Mamre. After there, he journeyed toward the territories of Negeb and lived between Kadesh and Shur. He sojourned in Gerar. Abraham said of Sarah, his wife, "She's my sister." And Abimelech, the king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said, "Behold, you are a dead man because of the woman whom you have taken, for she is a man's wife." Abimelech had not approached her. So he said, "Lord, will you kill an innocent people? Did he not himself say to me, 'She's my sister'?" And she herself said, "He's my brother. In the integrity of my heart and the innocence of my hands, I've done this." And God said to him in the dream, "Yes, I know that you have done this in the integrity of your heart, and it was I who kept you from sinning against me. Therefore I did not let you touch her. Now then, return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, so that he will pray for you, and you shall live. But if you do not return her, know that you will surely die, you and all who are yours." Abimelech rose early and called all his servants, told them these things. The men were very much afraid. Abimelech called Abraham and said to him, What have you done to us? And how have I sinned against you that you have brought on me and my kingdom a great sin? You have done to me things that ought not be done. And Abimelech said to Abraham, "What did you see that you did this thing?" And Abraham said, "I did it because I thought there's no fear of God at all in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. Besides, she is indeed my sister, the daughter of my father, though not of the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. And when God caused me to wander from my father's house, I said to her, 'This is the kindness you must do me at every place to which we come. Say of me, he's my brother.'" Okay. Whew. All right. So we have a little more detail than we did with the story in Egypt. One of the things that the author is careful to point out, which, by the way, this is not the last we'll see of Abimelech. That's not the last we'll see of him this morning in what we're going to read, and it's not the last of him we're going to see in Genesis, because we have a very similar issue that happens with Isaac and Rebekah and Abimelech in chapter 26, which, again, makes you scratch your head and go, why? But anyway, one of the things that the author is very, very careful to point out, as a matter of fact, I think 3 times, this is either said directly or it's at least hinted at, that Abimelech did not touch Sarah. Okay? Now, there's reasons for that. One early on, with the incident in Egypt, nothing is said about Pharaoh in that particular setting, of whether he did or whether he didn't. Okay? And so one of the commentators I read when we were looking at that particular section was, it seems likely that he did because nothing is said that he didn't. And they make it very clear that Abimelech doesn't. I think that's fine, but I think there's something else that the author is wanting to make sure that everybody knows. Okay? Because in chapter 21, we're going to have the birth of Isaac. And it's very important. It's very important to the author and to his audience that there is no question as to whose son Isaac is. Right? It's going to be Abraham's son. This is God keeping his promise. And the author wants to make sure that you know that, or that his readers know that. That they're not going to come back later and go, well, yeah, she had a son, but, oh, by the way, did you know about Abimelech? And it's very, very clear that this is going to be the son of promise. Now, there's twice that this is mentioned here. It's mentioned again at the end that Abimelech gives them silver as a witness to her innocence in all of this. And then Abraham prays for him. The people have been affected with infertility. And Abraham prays, and God opens the womb of the people of Gerar. Right? So we're going to stop with 20. We're going to move on into the 20 or 21 and 20, because that's really what we want to get to. And Abimelech's going to show up again in this. So let's look at chapter 21. The Lord visited Sarah, as he had said. And the Lord did to Sarah as he had promised. And Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age, at a time of which God had spoken to him. Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, who Sarah bore to him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him, and Sarah said, God has made laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh over me. And she said, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. Okay, so in case the whole hinting at with Abimelech wasn't clear enough, we make sure, again, that the author is telling his readers, again, you know where this came from. Right? Abraham's 100. This has to do with God. Right? Sarah bore a son to Abraham. This is the son she bore to Abraham. And that phrase also is going to get repeated. And we name him Isaac because that's what he was supposed to be named, because that means laughter. Right? And so now we have the son of the covenant who is here. Circumcised at 8 days. Granted, we don't ever forget what about the covenant made back in chapter 17. That every child born to Abraham, born through the line of Abraham at 8 days would be circumcised, and this is the first one we read about. This is the first one. This is the child of the covenant promise. Right. Now, as usual, more things are getting ready to happen. The child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. But Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, laughing. So she said to Abraham, cast out this slave woman with her son, for the son of this slave woman shall not be an heir with my son Isaac. And the thing was very displeasing to Abraham on account of his son. But God said to Abraham, do not be displeased because of the boy and because of your slave woman. Whatever Sarah says to you, do as she tells you, for through Isaac shall your offspring be named. And I will make a nation of the son of the slave woman also, because he is your offspring. Abraham rose early in the morning, took bread and a skin of water, and gave it to Hagar, putting it on her shoulder along with the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was gone, she put the child under one of the bushes. She then went and sat down opposite him a good way off, about the distance of a bow shot, for she said, let me not look on the death of the child. As she sat opposite him, she lifted up her voice and wept, and God heard the voice of the boy, and the angel of the Lord called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, what troubles you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the boy where he is. Up, lift up the boy, hold him fast with your hand, for I will make him into a great nation. God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. She went and filled the skin of water and gave the boy a drink. And God was with the boy, and he grew up. He lived in the wilderness and became an expert with the bow. He lived in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took a wife for him from the land of Egypt. Okay, Uh, well, okay, so we have Isaac now at about 3. That seems to be the consensus of when Isaac was weaned. It would have been somewhere at least 3 years old. And we have Ishmael, who is now late teens. He's 13 whenever he's circumcised, is what chapter 17 says. And we have somewhere in the neighborhood of at least a year, right? Prior to the birth of Isaac. And so we have 3 more years. And so I know it's just me, but this, when we get this picture of Hagar and the child in the wilderness, we think of Hagar and a baby in the wilderness. All right, does anybody else think that? When she talks about, she put the child under the bush and she went down so she wouldn't see. He's older. Okay, he's a lot older than we think. I don't know if that helps anything or not, but anyway, that's where we are. A little troubled. What this word laughing means, that's kind of, I think that's another play on Isaac's name. It's part of it. And so there's a wide range of speculation of what this means. It's just out there, so we can talk about it. It's either mocking or making fun of in some way. Don't know if that's the truth. I mean, all the way to actual, real physical violence, we would say. Because here's something for you to think about. We mentioned Isaac and Rebekah and Abimelech. That's coming up in chapter 26. The same kind of thing happens, right, where Isaac tells Rebekah, say that she's a sister, and so the men of Gerar are all, vying for her attention in some way or another. And then Abimelech, it says Abimelech sees Isaac laughing with Rebekah. And many scholars believe that is some sort of an intimate act of some sort. And so they read that back into this, of whether maybe Ishmael may actually be abusing Isaac. I don't know if there's any evidence of that. It's out there. But for whatever reason, and what seems to be the reason that drives Sarah to say, I want rid of these two, right? We're not going to point out that it's her and Abraham's doing that he's here to start with, right? But I want him gone, and it's because of the inheritance. He's not going to inherit with the rightful son. There is some precedent to this, by the way, that the son of a slave, which we would look at Ishmael, is in line for inheritance rights in the ancient Near East. And being the firstborn would probably be pretty good, would imagine. So the way of what would have to happen for him not to be in line for inheritance is he'd have to be free. And so basically, if you were looking at it from a slave's point of view, would you trade? That would be the cost of your freedom, would be your inheritance. You'd give up the inheritance so you could be free. Make sense? No. In this case, they're not getting the option. Sarah says, I want them gone. And Abraham doesn't want to do it. Now, I don't know what to make of that. I really don't. And maybe even more troublesome is I don't know, I do know, but it may give us a little bit of trouble of what to make of God's response in this. How do you square that with God, who is the defender of the widow and the fatherless? That when Abraham is troubled about giving him a canteen and some bread and saying best of luck to you, and Abraham doesn't really want to do that, God going, no, it's fine, go ahead and do it. Seems odd. We should remember, however, that God already knows what's getting ready to happen with Ishmael, and that shouldn't shock us because it's back in chapter 16 when they get sent out the first time, when Hagar gets sent out the first time when she's pregnant, that God appears to her and tells her to go back and says, as for your son, I will make of him a great nation. And God's going to keep his promise. Okay? And so God says, I'll take care of him. And he does. God appears. We're back to that same kind of issue. One of the things that we see here is the same thing that we saw in chapter 16, is that it's God who calls Hagar by name, and not Abraham or Sarah. It's that slave woman and her son. Yeah. But watch the way God values people that we might not. How about that? That we ought to pay attention to. Okay, anyway, so that's where we end there. And now Abimelech is back. We make a treaty. And Abimelech says, I want you to swear to God. This is what he said. Abimelech, Phicol, the commander of his army, said to Abraham, God is with you in all that you do. Now therefore swear to me here, by God, that you will not deal falsely with me or any of my descendants or with my posterity, but as I have dealt kindly with you, so you will deal with me and with the land where you have sojourned. And Abraham said, I swear. Now, I don't think that's a stretch for Abimelech to go, okay, we've been good to you, and you're sojourning here, but I want you to swear by the God that you serve that you're going to be honest with me. Because you weren't the first time we met, right? Okay? All right. We have this whole issue with a well that gets worked out. We have Beersheba, which is going to give us the origins of this place called Beersheba, which is the south part of Israel. And later on, when you read through Israel, it says that they waited all the way from Dan to Beersheba. That is all of Israel. That's the north and the south. Okay, that's as far as they go. All right. So, because we want to get to this next part. Here we go. Maybe one of the most well-known incidents in the book of Genesis, maybe in Scripture altogether. After these things, God tested Abraham. He said to him, Abraham, and he said, here I am. He said, take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love. Go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on the mountains of which I shall tell you. So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, took 2 of his young men with him and his son Isaac. He cut the wood for the burnt offering and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. On the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar. Then Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you. Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering, laid it on Isaac his son, and he took in his hand the fire and the knife. So they went both of them together. And Isaac said to his father Abraham, my father. And he said, here I am, my son. He said, behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? Abraham said, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son. So they went, both of them together. When they came to the place where God had told him, Abraham built the altar there, and he laid the wood in order and bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand, took the knife, and slaughtered his son. And the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. He said, here I am. He said, do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, seeing that you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Abraham lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him was a ram caught in a thicket by its horns. Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. Abraham called the name of that place, the Lord will provide, as it is said to this day, on the mountain of the Lord it shall be provided. Okay, stop right. Wow, there's so many questions. He does, but he doesn't. Okay, he does because he's the descendant of Abraham. He's going to bless him, But when it comes to this is the son of the covenant. That's why I think that's why he calls him out, your son, your only son, Isaac, right? So, right, and maybe to keep, so Abraham doesn't have a loophole, right? So offer your son. Well, where did Ishmael go, right? You know, I mean, probably not, but, you know, to make sure that we know exactly who this is that he's asking for. But yeah, I think that's right. Just think with me through this for just a second. One of the tipping points, let's call it that. One of the tipping points for God and his dealings with Israel and Judah, and particularly I think we read more about Judah than we do about Israel after the divided kingdom, and we get ready for the Babylonian exile. And Manasseh, who is the worst of the kings of Judah. Okay? One of the things that gets repeated about what it is that Manasseh has done that has caused God to say, that's it, that's enough, you're out of here, is that you have made your sons and daughters pass through the fire, Molech, this idea of child sacrifice, right? Which is more common later than it is earlier, seems to be through this part of history. What I read from the ancient Near East at the time of Abraham, most of this, if it's going to be child sacrifice, it's done not when they're older, right? It's done as infants, which is, again, just absolutely crazy to me. But anyway, it seems to be relatively rare. So, but if God so abhors this practice of child sacrifice, why is it that he's telling Abraham, this is what I want you to do? Go.
About the worship his son on was supposed to have been in both Jewish temples, and it's currently allegedly underneath the golden dome that the Muslims have, that spot.
True. Yeah, thank you. We're going to get to that in just a second too. But yeah, the mountains of Moriah, 1 Chronicles chapter 3 and verse 1. Okay? I just know that because I looked it up sometime this week and I remembered. But identifies Moriah as the place where the temple's built. So this place where this event takes place, supposedly, right now, there's always scholars and they always ruin everything, but there's some of them go, there's no way that can be the same place because he wouldn't have done this. Bill, go ahead.
All the walk of Abraham over the years with God and seeing all the things that he blessed him with, including the amazing birth of Sarah. Sarah gave birth at 89, that he in the back of his mind felt that God was going to make it right.
I think that's where, right. So if you didn't hear that, and if you're with us online, you probably did. That Abraham's time spent walking with God convinced him, or at least had in the back of his mind, that God would make this right, even if this was what he was going to do. Now, by the way, that's not foreign to anybody. I mean, that shouldn't be foreign to us. The Hebrews writer picks that up. That says that he's supposing that God would raise him from the dead, is what the Hebrews writer says. Okay. But at that, okay, that's a good possibility. Nowhere is it mentioned that Abraham tells Sarah what they're getting ready to do. Right? Now, can you imagine the fight? Okay? Now, just think about this for just a second. She's already sent away Hagar when Hagar was pregnant. Right? Because she couldn't have a son. Now she has one. And at this celebration when he's weaned, because he's survived childhood to this point, that's really what the celebration's for, is that when she perceives a wrong done to him by this slave woman's son, Ishmael, that she gets rid of them. Again, now Abraham going, okay, well, I got good news and bad news, right? God spoke to me, that's good news. The bad news is he wants me to take Isaac and kill him. Now, you know, maybe he didn't tell him because Abraham would never have made it out of the tent. I don't know, right? But nothing. How old is Isaac when this happens? I don't know. There's some that would suggest that he is maybe teens when this happens. There's not really a timeline given unless I missed it, and I could have. He's obviously old enough to go. He's obviously old enough to know what's going on and to carry the wood for the sacrifice. So it's past 3 a ways. So why in the world do we do this? And I think there's a lot. This seems like a very extreme thing for God to ask, wouldn't you say? Yes? No? Maybe? I mean, this seems like a big ask. And one more time, we see Abraham do it. There's something else that I think that the author wants us to pick up on, and it's hard when we hit this in bits and pieces, but there's these things that form kind of bookends to this section of Abraham's life. Okay, I'm pretty sure I've got this right. I'm given to understand this. I don't know this for a fact because I don't speak the language. Okay? Chapter 12. Now the Lord said to Abram, go up from your country. And I'm given to understand that when he calls Abraham to go to sacrifice Isaac, that same word is used. To go from, to go up. And I think one of the things that the author would want us to see, I hope, is the distance that Abraham travels from the call to now this point. That he went, and when we see exactly what happens after he goes, right? As soon as he goes, the first thing he does is go to Egypt, right? And now he goes, and at this point, after following God for this long, he goes, and he goes all the way. I mean, to the point that he has the knife out and ready. And I think one of those things that we see is how much that, and Bill, you had it, right? Somewhere in Abraham's mind of going, this is going to work. I don't know how, but this is going to work, because this is a huge ask. This is not just, if that wasn't enough, this is not just about sacrificing a son. This is killing your future. This is it, right? The way that the ancients perceived living on was through their offspring. Ishmael is gone. And this is Abraham's offspring, with Sarah, the covenant child. The one through whom all of the promises are going to come is right here, and God says, get rid of him. Offer him up. And he does it.
Isaac's standpoint, his father is well in age, and he is allowing him to bind him and put him on the wood.
Right.
He is going complete submission to his father.
Right. Good. For those of you who couldn't hear that, and for those of you online, we look at this, which we don't do enough. By the way, thank you. We don't do enough, is look at this from the point of view of Isaac. Abraham is, well, he's past 100, right? By however many years now. Isaac seems to be the able-bodied one of the two. I mean, no offense to anybody that's over 100, but that just seems to be reasonable. He's the one who's carried the wood there, and it says that Abraham binds him, and there's no struggle. He just lets it happen. So not enough, I don't think enough is said. Isaac is one of those characters that not a lot said about. If you've ever noticed that, it's just he's kind of there, and we get a few things about him, and then we move on, because we got Abraham on this end, and we've got Jacob on this end, and he's just kind of in there, and I don't think there's enough said. This idea of his going, okay, he's got somewhere, he has to believe this too, that everything's gonna be okay. He's got to trust that what Abraham says of the Lord was going to provide for us, he's got to believe that. Now, I got to tell you, I don't know how old Isaac is, but even if he's a teenager, I'd have had a lot of trouble with that. I don't know, anybody else in here? Yeah. Going, okay, well, this is getting close, right? He's really going to do it. Okay. That's a big ask. Verse 15. The angel of the Lord called to Abraham and said, "By myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son. I will surely bless you. I will surely multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven and as the sand that is on the seashore, and your offspring shall possess the gate of his enemies. And in your offspring shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice." Abraham returned to his young men. They arose and went together to Beersheba, and Abraham lived in Beersheba. So I guess the thing that we ought to look at is that we sit here on a Sunday morning in an adult Bible class in an auditorium, and we say, all right, so God comes to you and he says, I want you to give up your only son, your firstborn, or whatever that may be, right? And we go, I don't know. Right? Now the right answer, since we're sitting among other people, is going, absolutely I would, because God will provide, right? But we're in the back of our mind, we're going, not so sure. Well, there's good news. Good news is that God has not asked us to do that, right? But God has asked us to give up things that are incredibly dear to us. Hasn't he? Like our own way of seeing the world, our own decisions, the ways that we would like to respond, our own way of having things. He's asked us to give those up. He's asked us to be Isaac. How about that? He's asked us to say, and just says, would you just get on the altar?
Saying that God, that Job fears you because he has things you like, and
Right.
children, he has much wealth. So God put it to the test.
Right.
I'm not saying that's exactly what happened, but it's whether Satan was in the mix of trying to provoke that. You know, it would be a great way to divide or dismantle God's gift created new generation. So
True.
it's possible that in the background somewhere we don't see it.
Yeah, somewhere in the back we have that same one that talks to God in Job saying, yeah, sure, Abraham's going to follow you. just gave him a son. What if you take it? Disinterested righteousness, I think, is what they refer to that as in among the scholars with Job. Or does Job fear God for nothing? Or will Job fear God for nothing, even if it means loss? And so what is it that he's asking us to give up? I don't know. Our pride, I don't know what it is. And do we think, right? I guess this is where it really gets down to it, is do we think that if we give this up, are we certain that God's going to take care of us without it? Because Abraham seemed to be. And as we look at the end of the story, right, God's able to. It's also interesting, isn't it, that in or close to, if we're right, which again, we just don't listen to the scholars that disagree with us. How about that, right? About where Moriah is. But if we think that Moriah is around the temple area, that a couple thousand years later, that God's Son will carry the wood for the sacrifice to the place where it goes, and God will not withhold him, but he'll offer him for us. If the test for Abraham is, how much, Abraham, how much do you love me? How much do you trust me? How much am I worth to you? Am I worth you tying up your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and offering him on an altar? Am I worth that to you? And Abraham's answer is yes. And God says, okay, that's all I needed to know. That we didn't even ask that question of God, and he just did it anyway. God goes and reverses it of going, this is how much you are worth to me. That I will not withhold my son, my only son, that I love, for you. I think that's a good place to stop. Let's pray. Father, it's hard to express how much we love what you've done for us. There's not enough words, not enough things for us to respond when we realize that you didn't withhold from us of the value that you place on us, the worth that we have, just as being people created in your image, that you were willing to do what you did. Father, all that we can do is to offer you our very lives. Is to offer you the things that maybe that we hold most dear. The things that we may have trouble imagining getting along without. But it's the only thing we can do. We're thankful for these records that have been kept, that it demonstrates to us who you are, your absolute faithfulness, and the longing that you have to be with us. Help us to be more like that. We love you so much. In Jesus' name, amen.